Okay, one more time, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. James Beichler.
Thank you. I only wish my students were that kind. First of all, let's get groundwork clear. I'm talking about science and philosophy. I'm not going to say anything about God, spirit, or anything else. So when I'm talking about the universe, I mean a scientific universe, nothing outside of it. I'm only talking about the realm that is covered by science, so that you can all choose to interpret it spiritually or religiously the way you want. Okay? I don't want to offend anybody, and I don't know what anybody's beliefs are. That's why this is just science, and that's all. Now, basically what I'm going to contend is that purpose is built into the universe. Almost a law of the universe, like a law of physics or something. And basically I'm going to be talking about physics because that's what I do. I'm a physics professor. Now, in what we do in science, we have to define things. So to talk about purpose, I have to say something about what purpose is. Purpose, we as humans make choices through what is called free will. And so if we're going to do something, we have a certain purpose in mind. So we do things that will bring about our personal purposes or goals. Now, purpose then is sort of an act of our free will. But when we talk about more of an ultimate purpose in nature, we're talking about something that is at odds with our free will, because we are directed in a certain way to a purpose that we have no choice in. So, whereas my immediate purpose is to reach a particular goal, I came here, I got in my car or my van, and I drove here. That was my purpose, to come here. In a sense, we impress that on nature and expect a purpose in nature also. But nature doesn't have any free will. Not at all. So how can I say that the universe itself has purpose? And this is going to be basically a logical argument. Now, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. I can write better than I can speak on something like this, because I can proofread it 10 times and get it right. Nature itself is, in a sense, goal-oriented. According to science, the universe began, the theory is now that the universe began with a Big Bang, and that life evolved from some type of a ooze and or came on a comet and was dumped here. And they say that because they find all kinds of organic compounds out in outer space. We can see it by the spectral lines that the different organic compounds give off. So there's a possibility the precursors for life were brought here on a comet or asteroid. Or if you believe in any other way, that's fine. But life came here, and since life started, it has been evolving, changing. Life is constantly evolving and changing. Now, life evolves not through free will, of course, but because, and the universe began under a certain set of conditions and by rules and laws in the universe. I'll use the word rules rather than laws. Now, it's the goal of science to discover those rules, and those would be physical laws, natural laws, and different laws by which the universe goes. Certain parameters and rules, though, we can say are embedded in nature, the way the universe works, when science tries to discover this. So, no matter how you believe that humans came about, our development follows the rules of nature. So, in a sense, you might think that nature might be goal-oriented. Now, we can't impose our type of purpose on nature, because that would be admitting nature has free will. And I don't think anybody would try and say that nature has free will. But nature does follow certain rules. And we evolve through those same rules. So we follow the same rules as nature. Now, there are two different theories of physics. to explain ultimate reality and the universe. One is called quantum theory. Now, quantum theory is what is called indeterminate. The future happens moment by moment. Any possible future is possible. There are an infinite number of futures. That's called indeterminism. Now, if you believe the quantum theory is a basis of physical reality, then there would not possibly be any chance for purpose, because purpose somehow brings in the concept of predetermination. I am not a quantum theorist, so I'm not even going to deal with that. I am a relativist. I follow the other, basically that at the bottom nature is continuous, that every point, every mathematical point in the whole universe is connected to every other mathematical point in a single field. So everything is connected, unlike individual events coming together to make a reality. Everything is connected. Now, relativity theory then doesn't say there's a purpose, of course, but it does allow that as a possibility because everything is connected. Now, in relativity theory, and relativity theory is deterministic, meaning that if I know the positions and the velocities of all particles, I can predict what the future would be of the universe, except for free will. See, free will is the thing that comes in and prevents this from happening, because free will is choice. If there were no consciousness, no human beings and or other sentient beings, the universe, you tell everything that's going to happen in the future just because you know the particles, the velocities, and how they react under nature's rules. Free will, in a sense, breaks nature's rules. Well, only to an extent. We don't really have total free will. If we had total free will, I'd be enjoying a steak in Paris right now. Why bother? I mean, we only have free will within the constrictions that nature places on us, that the universe places on us. And I'm using nature and the universe together as the same idea. Now, in relativity theory, which is totally deterministic, we can draw something that's called a space-time diagram. It's trying to put the 3 dimensions of space and the 4th dimension of time into a single diagram. And it'll look like something like this. This would be the time axis, and this would be the space axis. And this axis would represent all 3 dimensions of space, length, height, and depth. And we draw a line like this. And this point right here is now. And everything in this part is called the past, and everything in this part is called the future. And this is called a light cone. You may have heard those. The concept is quite popular. And basically, this line and this line represents the fastest speed that objects, ideas, thoughts, whatever we have, supposedly can travel, the speed of light. So this is the speed of light, speed of light, speed of light, speed of light. Then everything out here is non-existent. And Minkowski, when he originally drew this first space-time diagram, called that the absolute elsewhere. That it has nothing to do with our universe. Now, if this is our events right now, here, I can draw a line through here, and this line would be called the world line. This is my world line. This line, if I look at all the points I was and all the different times I was at these places in space, this would represent my history. This is right here, right now, and then this would be the part of the world line into the future, my future. Now, as I was just saying, without free will, I could actually determine this using the laws of physics. But because of free will, it's indeterminate. But that would be a final goal, a final objective, a final purpose. Now, this is all really that relativity theory could say. But what you have to remember is this, that the universe as a whole has its own world line because it has a beginning, a now, and a future. And, well, that's sort of weird, isn't it? Because if the universe has its own rule line, following these same rules and laws, the universe is the rule line plus the graph itself, because the universe is all space and time. Because there's nothing outside the universe. And again, I'm speaking only in scientific terms. This is the realm that science deals with. You can put your own feelings and thoughts into it, your own beliefs into it. This is just our material, physical universe that science deals with. Now, the universe has its own world line, but it's also the whole space-time continuum. Well, now this implies then that the universe would also have its own goal. Now, since there's nothing outside the universe, how does the universe know itself? How does the universe realize itself? How does it be aware of itself? Well, look at it this way. If instead of this being the universe rule line, or my personal rule line, this whole group rule line, suppose this is evolution theory, however you view evolution, or creation, or whatever, and this is the beginning of humans, or the beginning of life itself, and we evolve life, start with the scientific theory that there's some kind of a primordial ooze here. Then later on you have a single-cell organism, then you have multi-cell organism, then you have more complicated organisms, and up here you have the human race. And the human race somehow then develops the concept of brain and mind, and somewhere along here the human race has gotten consciousness. Now, through this whole evolution, from the beginning of life up to the first consciousness, we're following the rules of the universe. So it would seem that life, mind, and consciousness are a direct consequence of the rules of the universe. That somehow life, mind, and consciousness are meant to be, because they're following and developed within the rules of the universe. So why would the universe do this? Because the universe has to follow its own rules, doesn't it? It has to start, if you go back even in science and the Big Bang Theory, that at that time certain preconditions, certain conditions were there, and that led to protons, electrons, atoms, molecules, and everything. So in a sense, if life, mind, and consciousness, and I'll put the emphasis on consciousness, develop within the universe following the rules, the universe has to follow its own rules, so the goal, now I don't want to say purpose, because that determines free will. That is associated with free will. So I'm going to say that the universe is goal-oriented, and that goal is to develop consciousness, not individual consciousness, universal consciousness, that the universe is trying to realize itself. Since there's nothing outside of it, again, within the scientific realm, there's nothing outside the universe. Nothing, it can't realize itself from outside, and it has to realize itself intrinsically, internally. And it does that by developing life, mind, and consciousness in beings like us. And in beings, we can say instead of this is the primordial ooze on Earth, this might be the first life that formed in the whole universe. So life as a whole, mind and consciousness, are a development of the universe, by the universe, for the universe, with the universe trying to realize itself. So the universe is goal-oriented, with either consciousness or consciousness plus, super consciousness or something. And so we are just, in a sense, and other conscious sentient beings are just the universe trying to become aware of itself as a natural consequence of the universe. So in science, I wouldn't like to use the word purpose as much as goal-oriented. Goal-oriented being more of a neutral scientific term. Now, we have developed consciousness, and we're headed at some point towards consciousness plus. I would also contend that because of this, as soon as the first consciousness, in a sense, evolves or comes about or develops within the universe, at that point you can say the universe as a whole is consciousness. Because if you take relativity, where everything is just a single continuous field, as soon as one part of that field becomes consciousness, then the whole field must be conscious. So whether we're not the first consciousness, whether we evolved separately, were created, something made us evolve, not a supreme being, maybe we were transplanted here by aliens, I don't know. But we're still following that. We're still part of this path of the universe trying to realize itself. Now, what is our purpose then? Well, our purpose, following the universal rules of the universe, must be for our consciousness to grow. Well, how does our consciousness grow? Well, at what point do we become consciousness? I believe that life developed first and brain developed. And at the same time, our electrochemical material thingies up here that are in our heads developed the brain. There was another level developed at the same time, and that's called mind. The mind is not brain, the brain is not mind. The brain is just an electrochemical device. It is a mechanical organism. Mind is something else. I believe that mind is the whole body. It just primarily acts, not totally acts, but primarily acts through the brain. And so we have mind. Now I think a lot of things, a lot of living things probably have brain and mind. I think everything has brain, has mind. But I don't think everything has consciousness. That you may not agree with that, but I don't think everything has consciousness, at least not the type of consciousness I'm talking about. Now, how do we go from mind to consciousness? Well, at some point, a human realized that there is something beyond what's right here, right now, locally. This is called locality versus non-locality in physics. That some human being, the mind of some human being, became aware of the fact that in the case of a child, when mom disappears outside the room, mom still exists. That there's locality and non-locality in space. And then, and this is the same way a child develops, and then a child learns that there's non-locality in time also. That there is a past, a present, and a future. Locality of space and time, non-locality of space and time, the past, present, and future. And that we became conscious beings, or we reached the level that we now call consciousness, when the first human being realized the non-locality of space and time. That there was a larger universe, because at that point, that first person became part of a larger universe than just what it could see and hear right then, right there. And that was when the consciousness that I'm talking about evolved. It just depends on how narrow or how broadly you define consciousness. This is the way I define it. Now, if that is true then, and that was learned through knowledge, through memories, because we have the memories, and our mind puts all these memories together to say that there's something beyond, and there's non-locality and time also, past, present, future. So it would seem then that our mental development of consciousness depends on knowledge. Now, we don't have total knowledge yet we already have knowledge. We've already developed consciousness. Now, with consciousness then, consciousness is what relates our knowledge to the rest of the universe. It gives us perspective on the rest of the universe. This is our purpose. If consciousness, life, mind, and consciousness are normal developed within the universe, here, there, everywhere, and science believes, science actually believes that life is developing everywhere. So it would seem to be a natural consequence of the physical laws. And if you don't believe me, then why do we send out Pioneer and Voyager space missions with those gold plaques on them that the spaceship location for the Earth, a man and a woman, a record with everybody saying hello in 120 some or 130 some different languages and everything. Because we expect life to be out there. We expect life to be natural. There's an actual mathematical formula saying the probability of how many planets would have life in this universe. And it's in the hundreds and thousands of billions of planets would have life in this universe, statistically. So we think life, we believe this. I'm just taking that one step further and say that if life, mind, and consciousness is developed, then that's a natural thing in the universe. So our purpose is the gathering of knowledge. And since we're only at a level of consciousness now where we've realized non-locality versus the locality in space and time, that as we learn more about the universe, I don't care if it's Hubble photographs of distant stars, we are constantly gaining knowledge. Now I'm talking about true knowledge. Things that are true, you know, there is some false knowledge too. If you want to see evil, that's evil. True knowledge is good, false knowledge is evil. In a sense, if you want to put it in those terms. Oversimplification, but to the point. So that knowledge is our purpose. Our purpose to follow is to, in a sense, enlighten the universe. Enlighten the universe. And so the gathering of true knowledge, knowledge about the rest of the universe, would be our immediate goal and our immediate purpose. And so, if you want to say consciousness plus, and this is the term I use for it, enlightenment. Superconsciousness. I think enlightenment is when we begin to realize a greater universe around us and become more connected to the rest of that universe by our knowledge. So the knowledge is our purpose, and the ultimate purpose of the universe then, through us, individually, every point in space and time, every mathematical point, all space, all time, since they're all connected through a single field, the ultimate goal is self-realization. And as far as science is concerned, science has a problem with dealing with the concept of consciousness because they can't define it. The best and the only criteria for consciousness they know of is self-awareness. And we'd say that if a monkey can recognize its face, it's self-aware, so therefore it has consciousness. And so they argue which animals have consciousness and which don't. Well, that self-awareness would be locality versus non-locality, because if you're local, then you're differentiating yourself from everything else in the universe, in your environment, and that's when you have self-awareness. Okay, that was short and sweet. So I will try and open it up for questions. I don't even think I went 35 minutes.
Well. Okay.
23.
That's okay. Have it a mic, Greg.
It won't go that far.
Oh, over that far. Okay.
For mine then.
Well then, good. A mic. Oh my God, a mic. Okay. Okay. If I understood that correctly, the last sentence that you said,
Turn the mic on, John.
it's on.
I don't hear
It's
it.
on. It's on.
Now it's on.
Okay. If consciousness requires locality,
I'm just saying I'm breaking down physics terminology. That's
Okay.
physics terminology.
in physics, consciousness requires locality, but in the fifth dimension,
Mhm.
there is no space or time. There would be no locality. So is there consciousness? Could you then have consciousness after you left the fourth dimensional space-time continuum?
First of all, for those of you who weren't here, I developed the five-dimensional unified field theory, and the theory is that, according to theory, life, mind, and consciousness are basically field density patterns in the fifth dimension. Fifth dimension is just an extension of our four-dimensional space-time. Now, in a sense, there is locality in the fifth dimension, but it's not specified the same way. When I'm talking about us here developing ideas of locality and non-locality, I'm talking the material four-dimensional space. And then the consciousness becomes a field density pattern in the fifth dimension. Now, I believe that when we reach enlightenment, that's when we become aware of. The next step in consciousness is when we become aware of our locality and non-locality in the fifth dimensional space. When we, in a sense, determine ourselves as individuals, yet still connected within the fifth dimension single field. Does that make sense to you?
I'm sorting it out.
But it's still a locality, but it's a locality outside of our four-dimensional space-time.
So effectively, in the fifth dimension, consciousness would be potential consciousness?
Well, in a sense, I think all babies, once a race, a species develops consciousness, that consciousness then becomes a principle for integrating and running the body, the life, and the mind and brain. So then it more or less repatterns us genetically. So each next generation in the species is born with the consciousness, in a sense, already there. They're just filling in the blanks. They're born with a blank sheet of consciousness, and it's still in its genetics. Does that answer your question? Because, see, at each level, life develops and then organizes the body and chemical reactions in the body. Life develops mind. The mind organizes life. The mind evolves consciousness, and consciousness organizes mind, life, and the body down.
See, whereas I would argue it's the opposite.
Well,
I
you're
think
starting from consciousness.
Yeah, I think consciousness is first.
Well,
And consciousness then brings about
Since
life,
there's-
and life brings about
since
life.
there's no time outside of the four-dimensional space-time continuum, and there is a sense that I'd have to agree with you, because there is no past, present, or future in the fifth dimension. It's the everything is now, all eternity is now. So, in a sense, if that's the goal, see, the universe itself as a whole here is all of space and time. The universe itself does not differentiate between time. It is only we as four-dimensional space-time beings differentiate a history, a present, and a future. The universe as a whole doesn't, because it's all of time and all at the same time. It's all of time simultaneously, the whole universe. That would include the fifth dimension. It's just we have not evolved that high yet. And from what I remember of Buddhism, that when Siddhartha Gautama was enlightened, he made a choice. He had a choice to make. He could either, I don't know, evaporate or whatever he would have done, or he could stay and teach. Well, I don't know what happens. Evaporation is in a sense of the, well, evaporation, remember, I'm talking about science.
That's right.
So evaporation. So in a sense, we would have that choice to actually become part of the fifth dimension and, lose our bodies.
Well,
in that sense, our four-dimensional space-time bodies.
now, you made the statement, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Fort Reach?
It's okay, you can do it from
Just-
here.
let's move on.
It's fine.
Oh, if I can remember what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
Okay, now you say, for one thing, in the fourth dimension, or the
Four-dimensional space-time.
okay, space-time, we can have goals,
Mhm.
but in the fifth dimension, we cannot,
In the fifth
because we're
dimension,
already there.
well, we are extended right now in the fifth dimension. There's fifth dimension, but it's non-material, still physical. It's
Yeah,
field
right,
like magnetic, gravity. Those are just four-dimensional manifestations of a
Right.
single field.
We deal with the fifth dimension,
Yeah,
pretty much.
yeah. I agree.
So
Yes, you
we,
do.
I mean, but we're still in the fourth dimension, so we're just
You
kind of
haven't
reaching
evaporated
for it,
yet.
right. Yeah, so when you say, well, they just evaporate, consciousness would go on to the fifth dimension, so it could hardly evaporate.
Well, no, it's already there. I'm just saying four-dimensionally, in a sense, four-dimensionally we would
It's
evaporate.
already there.
Yes, our
So I've
consciousness
got
is already there. It's a
consciousness-
field density
I've
pattern.
got
in it.
consciousness and I have a super consciousness.
No, not yet.
Well, that's
Possibly
what,
not yet.
well, in
My
other
guess
words,
is you
have
wouldn't be
to
here if you
die.
had that super
You have
No,
to-
no. You ascend. Ascend.
You don't have to die, you just have to ascend.
No, No, this question came up before that someone said, does that imply then that you die, you're enlightened when you die? No, I'm not saying that when people die they're enlightened. That's not true, because some people are not aware of that connection with the fifth dimension.
You know what you're
So
calling,
they can reincarnate or whatever.
what you're calling fifth dimension, I remember, gosh, back in the 60s and 70s, cosmic consciousness was the big thing.
Yeah, it's the same difference.
Yeah.
It's just, the difference is only terminology is
And
what
there
I'm trying
were,
to
and
say.
then there was so many people that were
Who wrote the book,
supposed to
Cosmic?
re-
Bucky wrote the book. Bucky, I think, wrote the book, Cosmic Consciousness.
I
Yeah,
can't
1901.
remember. But then he had a long list, or, had lives of certain people that he felt had reached.
Yeah, that was Richard
Yeah.
Buck's book, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just I'm trying to put what you're doing in scientific
Yeah.
terms. More scientists would
This
listen
would
to you
listen.
if
That's
they had the
pure,
same
that's
terms.
pure Kabbalah, because
Gee, how about
it
that?
is. What? See, everything is in spirit first. It has to, in order to manifest in the physical.
Mhm.
So you're
I'd
just,
say not physical in the material.
Well,
I'd say the spirit's
material.
already physical.
Material. You're explaining, I got a book you ought to read called Cosmic Doctrine. I mean, it blows my mind. I'd be curious to know if you could understand it. Well, I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could. No, I don't mean to be, I don't mean to.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm smiling
It's-
because you're just
it's-
saying things that other people.
It's, but it goes through all of this process. It's supposed to have channeled information as to how creation came into being. But anyway, I mean, that's, now see, you work from facts to,
Scientific,
fifth
verify things that we can
and
verify.
I think that
You're
the
working through
fifth
faith.
dimension brings things into being,
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, or let's put it this way, it's a matter of perspective.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I have a dual perspective because at one and the same time I can imagine things on fifth dimension be. At the same time I can sort of think outside of time and how things would be in a five-dimensional space.
Right.
And it wreaks havoc at times.
Yeah.
It really does. How many of you watch science fiction, like Star Trek, and they get one of these time
Not for a long
anomaly
time.
things, and I can't remember who says it, Geordie or one time says that this time dynamics is hell or something like that. That's what you got when you're working five-dimensional. You know, it's an ancient, back to the 50s or 60s. There's one very famous science fiction story back from the 60s that, and it's talking about these police that time travel to make things happen. And if they want to get rid of Hitler, all they do is go back 100 years before Hitler and move the position of a can on a shelf, and that gets rid of Hitler 100 years later because somebody goes to reach for that can and misses it, and then the baby isn't born 100 years later or something.
Right.
And so that's all they ever do. They don't come back and shoot Hitler. No, they just go back 100 years before Hitler and move a can on a shelf, or kick somebody in the leg or something, and so Hitler never evolves. And the crux of the story is that this guy was one of these time cops, and he's speaking to the bartender, and he meets this woman next to him, and they start talking, and they end up shacking up for the night, and she has a baby, and the whole thing goes sour after 3 months. And then you get up to the end of the story. Well, that's the time cop, and he is so bad that later on in the future, he's talking in his past, so the girl he shacks up with is him after a sex operation. And the bartender is him at a later time, and the baby they have is him. So he's all the characters in the story, and this is this time paradox you have. Gee, if I go back and shoot my grandfather, will I be alive? I mean, time dynamics is really hell.
But you couldn't go back and shoot your grandfather if you weren't alive.
Yes. See, that's the paradox. And so trying to think out there where there's no time, you run into these logical paradoxes. And just plain, our logic doesn't work. Our logic does not work at all. I mean, it's not either or, and but, all at the same time and none of them also. And that's what it is. There is a special philosophy that actually covers that.
Okay, if the purpose of life is to acquire knowledge, to attain enlightenment, for the realization of self.
At our
Does.
level,
At
at the
our
higher
level.
level, that's the universe of the purpose. So
Okay.
we're just fulfilling the purpose of the universe itself.
So is the purpose of the universe, okay, the purpose of the universe then becomes self-realization. Okay, but for the universe to be seeking self-realization, does it not have to have the need for knowledge?
It is, but knowledge of itself, within itself. Our consciousness is in fifth dimension, but the universe, let us say the five-dimensional universe, has nothing outside. So it is realizing itself from within itself, which it can't do because it doesn't have the perspective. So we evolved to give it that perspective to
It does it through
realize
us.
itself,
But the
which
universe has
is a
to have
belief of
knowledge.
the 13th century Kabbalists, that God basically is infinite dimensional and took a little tiny part of himself out and created our four-dimensional space-time so God could realize himself by experiencing
Yeah.
himself.
But that would,
Gee,
that
that's real
would,
nice.
but that would say that the universe is then knowledge
In a sense it is.
and consciousness.
Yes, it
It is
is.
aware of itself.
It is being and becoming at the same time.
Being and becoming.
Which
At the
is,
same time.
which they've always said knowledge is power.
Well,
Which is-
that's a political statement.
It's a blind dichotomy. That's all it
Actually,
is. And that's-
I don't mean power over others necessarily, but it is power,
In a sense, yes. Yes, it's us reaching for a
yeah,
higher consciousness, which I think we're evolving toward.
yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting you use the term evaporation to describe the
I don't-
process of,
I
and
don't
that's
know.
what people call sex.
Yeah, well, there is no scientific term for it, so.
What I want to point out is that
Um,
evaporation, that same term is one of the stages used in medieval and Renaissance alchemy
mhm.
to describe the process of transmutation, or their idea of spiritual evolution of human being.
They use that term?
Yeah, that's one stage.
So
isn't it?
one
Good choice.
evaporates into a butterfly.
What goes around comes around.
I was actually just thinking about the Hermetic philosophies myself, because one of in the Kabbalion, one of the 7 laws is the law of correspondence, which says as above, so below.
Mm-hmm.
And the lesson here would be that the universe is realizing itself from within, and our job as a universe unto itself is therefore to realize ourselves from within.
As above, so below.
Yeah.
As the fifth dimension, so the four-dimensional space-time, above and below.
So we just answered the questions of the universe. I guess we're done.
One other thing, I have taken all this into account. And I don't know if you've heard of Fritjof Capra, who wrote the Tao of Physics back in the 70s. I actually had him for 2 courses at San Francisco State in the middle to late 70s. He was teaching there. A bit egotistical at the time. He thought very highly of himself. He was getting off on all the attention that he didn't think he'd get when he wrote the book. And he basically took and compared Eastern philosophy, some of the things in Eastern philosophies, to Western science. And now he's not the first done it. Lawrence LeShan has done it in the book, The Medium, the Mystic, and the Physicist, and other people have done it too. But the thing about Capra was he came up to the end of his book, in the last chapter, and he goes, well, it doesn't mean anything. Well, of course it means something. I've taken that further in a paper I've done called the Misfit Theory. MYS for mystic, fit from physicist. Misfit. It's called the misfit theory. And basically what Capra and others were starting to point out is that science and religion are converging towards the same point. Well, religion uses faith and intuition. Science uses reason and observation. Those are just the 2 halves of our brain. But there's only one brain, one universe. And so it's just the 2 points of view are coming together. And when I say a religion, I mean mystical religion, Kabbalah, Taoism, some of the mystic Buddhism, Sufis, everything. And then science, I'm talking about modern physics. But they are converging.
Yeah.
It's just the point where they converge. It's just we're becoming one mind. We'll learn to do everything both intuitively and logically at the same time. And that's my misfit theory.
Do you think purpose and meaning are the same? The universe has purpose. Does the universe have meaning?
If you phrase it that way, yes, I would say the same, but I wouldn't say in all circumstances they're the same. In that particular circumstance, I'd say, yeah.
Because in the Course in Miracles, it says life has no meaning except that which we give it.
Mm-hmm.
So using as above, so below, if that is accurate, then the other has to mean that there is no meaning in the universe.
Well, of course, Miracles says a lot of things just to get you thinking in abstractions. You know what I'm saying? I don't take Course in Miracles literally.
Yeah, you can't.
No.
Any other questions, comments?
Because,
Snide
well,
remarks?
it can take this later, it'll say
No.
us the opposite.
What are you describing as the fifth dimension?
The fifth dimension, basically I've worked on a theory that was developed by Albert Einstein in the 1930s to explain an underlying reality, the reality that underlines the reality that quantum physicists. It was part of his argument with Bohr about, God does not throw dice, when Bohr and Heisenberg said that God basically throws dice. The universe is indeterminate. He said, yes, at a lower level than quantum theory can go to, it's determinate. But he was trying to develop what he called a unified field theory. That gravity, electricity, magnetism, and the other fields in physics, there are only 4 fields in physics. There's matter in 4 fields, nothing else. Everything is made out of matter in 4 fields, and these 4 fields. So he is saying just matter and these 4 fields together are just manifestations of a single field, different manifestations. For a while he used the fifth dimension, where a field is physical, but it's not material.
Say those things again, the 5 things that are always used in physics.
No, the 5 things out of which our universe is built would be matter. Matter is a manifestation of a single field. Gravity, the electromagnetic field, the weak nuclear force, and a strong nuclear force. So that's 4 forces in matter. And everything is structured from those. Everything is structured from those. And those are just different manifestations of the single field. Now, what the single field is, I don't know. I can draw analogies to electric fields, gravity fields, and magnetic fields. Magnetic is the best one for analogy because you can actually feel, if you try and put the poles of a magnet together, you can feel the field there.
Right.
But what it is, I wouldn't say. All I can do is define a few of its properties.
But is the fifth dimension another direction?
It is another direction.
Okay, so it might be
And
inside-outside, like the within
It-
thing we were just talking about.
Yeah, the only way to understand the fifth dimension, and the arguments I'm going to give are over 100 years old when they started developing these ideas. And the first theory of this type that I'm talking about was actually developed by William Kingdon Clifford in 1870. So this is nothing new. And that is, make the analogy, just like I'm doing with the space-time diagram. This whiteboard is the whole universe. Here's space and time. There are the 4 dimensions. So we make an analogy of our 4-dimensional space-time to a 2-dimensional surface. And give them legs and a little head and some arms. And there's a human. That is a 2-dimensional being. We make analogies. See, we can't understand the 5th dimension. We can't understand its properties. What we do is we make analogy. Since we're 3-dimensional beings, we see how a 2-dimensional being would see our world and how we see the 2-dimensional beings. And we develop these geometrical concepts. And then we take that analogy and do a 5-dimension, 4-dimension instead. Well, this being here, he would sense his whole environment, his whole 2-dimensional environment would be coming in through his skin. He's surrounded by skin, right? You know, he's got a heart and a liver and a stomach and lungs, and he's got all that. Now, he can only, yes, I can actually do better if I try, but it'll take time, and this is more fun. But see, he can do, his universe, his 2-dimensional universe has all these rules and laws. His 2-dimensional universe has its own laws, and he can move around, interact with other people, and has his senses coming through the 2 dimensions. But everything comes through the skin. So everything in his universe only sees his skin. How do we see him from our higher dimensional perspective? We see every point in his body at the same time. Every point in his body is open to the higher dimension. And this is what you're talking
Like you
about.
can see right through into the inside organs, you're saying?
If you're 5-dimension, you can see every point in the body, the organs, everything that's going on in the body, everything. There's nothing hidden in 5 dimensions.
Okay.
There'll be nothing hidden in 5 dimensions.
So the fifth dimension is the observer, but would also therefore be the experiencer.
Yes.
That's a good point. Say that again.
And that is one of the basic problems in physics. Because physics has this problem, physics, deterministic physics, Newtonian physics, there's the rest of the universe that's being tested in the observer. There's matter and mind, Descartes. Mind and matter are different. Matter become the subject of physics, and mind was ignored. It went into limbo, a no man's land, and religion picked it up.
Oh, boy, did that.
Because science, well, mind, free will, choice, good or bad, evil or not, go to hell, go to heaven, or whatever. That was all part of mind. So for 200 years or more after Newton, after actually Descartes, because he's the one who did the separation of mind and matter, matter was part of physics. As far as physics was concerned, it doesn't matter whether you throw a ball off of a cliff or throw a person off of a cliff. It was animate matter was immaterial to physics. Immaterial, yes, it is material to physics, but non-animate material. That was a joke, I'm sorry.
Isn't matter, though, just energy slowed down to a visible level?
No. Matter can be turned into energy. Energy can be turned into matter, but energy is not matter, and matter is not energy. They interact together.
That's
They interact together, but they're not the exact same thing.
think of a soul leaving a body. The body that's left is the matter.
And something extra would leave. That would be the fifth dimensional extension that survives after death. And it's not energy, but it is related to energy, a subtle energy, I would call it. So, where does that leave us now? Everyone's thinking, I don't know if that's good or bad. Yes?
Does it matter?
I've asked that same question lots of times. Yes, it matters. Now, one thing about what I haven't gone to, and the question usually comes up when I talk to people, is someone always brings up the question of ethics. Where is ethics in all this? I've just given physics the role of being the new ethicist of the universe. Because if you believe in what I've been telling you, if you have any idea what I'm telling you, that we're all connected to a single field, our purpose, our goal is knowledge, we shouldn't go killing people because we don't have the right to take away we're actually hurting the universe by killing other people. We're hurting ourselves because we're connected to the single field. If you go out and do something really bad to a person, they get all emotional and feel bad, that energy, the chemical energy in the body, actually makes small alterations in the fifth dimension, which you feel through your connection to the field, and it's bad for you. You will eventually suffer that. When you die, when you become part of the fifth dimension, you will do your past life review, you will feel the emotions, the bad emotions you've caused other people, just as you will feel the good emotions. Hitler is probably going to be, for another billion years in our time, suffering from all the people that he did in. So ethics is actually built in, sense of ethics is actually built into this whole purpose thing that I'm trying to describe, which, wow, that's physics is getting carried away here talking about ethics, isn't it?
I like it.
Well, thank you.
One other thing, I don't know if you heard it, a few months ago there was a contest that was supported by John Templeton Foundation called The Power of Purpose, where they were giving away $100,000 first prize for someone writing an essay on the power of purpose. First prize is $100,000. They had two $50,000 prizes, 8 $25,000 prizes, and 20 $10,000 prizes. $500,000 in prizes by the John Templeton Foundation, which is trying to relate science and science and religion.
You're gonna write.
This is my essay in that contest, and I did not win.
Oh, you should have won.
Nothing.
You should have
They have a big web. They have a big web page. They had 4 or 5 categories. One of the categories was science and philosophy, and this was my essay, and a whole lot more detail than I did here. But I was limited. It was only 7 pages typed. They kept it real short. I ran the limit. And the 15th of September, the prizes were announced on the internet. I went and looked at some of them. Despite the fact that science and philosophy was one of the 4 or 5 categories, only 2 papers in science and philosophy won prizes. And one of them was a guy who's writing a book on Michael Faraday, who discovered the electromagnetic theory, sent in something from his book and won it. So technically, even though it was one of the categories, they were almost not represented in the prizes, science, philosophy categories.
Oh.
I felt really bad about that. I have problems with the John Templeton Foundation. He's paying out millions of dollars for people to bring science and religion together, and I've tried like 4 or 5 times to get grants from them in different things. But they got a very narrow view. It's their brand of Christian religion and science. They won't have anything to do with any other religion.
Nothing esoteric.
Very narrow, John Templeton's idea of Christianity. Not even a full-blown Christianity.
So what were some of the top winners? Just
You can look it up. It's
physics?
no. It was all personal experiences.
Oh my.
You know, people with drug problems explaining. I mean, one member of the European Parliament was a winner. Several authors were winners. Some journalists were winners. It's all professional people or people with sad stories and things. None of the philosophy, science really got into it except one history of science thing.
Didn't Einstein say science without religion was dead, or vice versa? I can't remember.
I don't
what he
think
said.
Einstein was great on religion.
Well,
Actually, he was an extremely
what I'm
spiritual person.
quoting is
He was
from
what?
Einstein.
Well,
I just
no.
don't remember if he said religion
No.
without science is dead, or
He may have
science
said
without
that, but the
religion.
actual quote goes back to Arnold Toynbee, I think, and it was, history without philosophy is dead, and philosophy without history isn't worth it, or something like that. But other people then have taken his history philosophy thing
Well, I think
And,
Einstein,
Well,
to different
what I'm
disciplines.
quoting
Einstein
from
may have
is my
done it.
book of quotations,
Yeah,
which attributes.
well, it's a
it to
modification of what
Einstein.
Arnold Toynbee said about
Yeah.
history and philosophy. A lot of people change it for their own discipline, so I wouldn't doubt that Einstein did.
Einstein was big on Buddhism.
Yeah, he talked with Krishnamurti and other people, yeah.
well, he was actually Jewish, wasn't he?
Very.
I
He's asked to
mean,
be the
he
first
wasn't-
president of Israel.
He wasn't Orthodox necessarily.
No, he was not Orthodox.
But
He
he
was his own
believed in
brand.
God. He
was
believed
more
in God.
He's more spiritual than
Yeah.
religious.
Yeah,
He's more spiritual than religious. And
Yeah.
yes, he believed in God, but
right.
I don't think really anybody's going to tell him what God was or
Well,
anything. I mean,
His
he had
idea
own
of God,
views.
he believed in a higher power.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Turn me off.